how do you then become shaped as a young man? Because what I'm really curious about is going into the CIA. I have this, and maybe this is a myth, that those who enter the CIA have been the most elite student, straight A student, captain of the football team, or whatever it may be. But was that your background?
No, and it is a bit of a myth, and a lot of it persists because of what happened in the olden days, in the 70s and 60s and 1980s. CIA recruited only from certain schools, only from certain families. It was a very small organization, and you had to know somebody who knew somebody to get in.
Okay.
So there was a very elite recruitment process. I mean, we're talking about training class sizes of 7 students twice a year.
Oh, my goodness.
It was tiny.
Okay.
After 9/11, my training class was 250 students, and it was one of 4 classes that year.
Okay.
So you're talking about something going from 14 students a year to 1,000 new graduates per year. So the agency completely transformed with the global war on terror. It needed diversity. It needed people of color. It needed languages that it didn't even know existed before.
Sure.
Right? The whole world changed. So I was not anywhere close to valedictorian. I had language. I had a risk tolerance. I had a very detailed background because I was in the military for so long. So that's how I got into CIA. The entire recruitment process for CIA is a game of one step, and they don't tell you any additional information. And if you do the one step, then they tell you the next step, and then they tell you the next step. So you never know what's ahead of you.
Yes.
That was a thrill for me.
It seems like you thrived in an environment where you didn't need to be certain, which is wild to me.
But I never knew that person.
Okay.
That's what was happening, is I was never given the ability to go into uncertainty. Because for me, I grew up in a household with a Vietnam vet who was my stepdad, and my mom was trying her hardest to erase all past cultural and religious heritage that was Latino. She was anti-Catholic. She was anti-Mexico. She was anti-Spanish. That's why I don't speak Spanish. So she was actively putting up walls to make sure that you can't go in any of these directions. And all that was left was the direction that my parents set for me. So you have to be willing to experiment to discover your ability in the face of uncertainty. What I learned growing up was that if I didn't want to go in the direction that my parents sent me, the only other option was to lie. So that was my life. My life was following the rules or completely disregarding the rules and fabricating the truth. It was ones and zeros for me. Complete and utter conviction to your lie, or do the truth.
And this is even prior to CIA.
Correct.
So
this was my coping mechanism to have a little bit of autonomy as a 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid.
So into university?
All the way in, and I went to university. I went to a military college only because it was a full ride scholarship on the opposite side of the country. That's it. It got me as far away from my family as I could get, and it was paid for because my family they didn't save anything for college for me. They didn't assume that I would ever get into college. They just assumed I would enlist in the military. And it wasn't until I got there that I realized I just signed up for a military school. That means more rules, more expectations, which is how I coped with that as well.
So say in college, at university, what's an example of a full-on lie that you told?
So in a military academy, you have 3 meals a day. 2 of those meals come with a formation. Formation literally means every student in the school goes out into the main field and stands in formation and takes accountability. They count every person, check in every name, make sure that you are wearing the right uniform, standing in the right spot, and then they march you to breakfast. And then you leave breakfast and they do it all again for lunch. And they march you to lunch twice a day, 5 days a week, without fail for 4 years, right? It took me about 3 months before I was like, this is not going to work for me, right? I have no problem with marching and going to a meal at a certain time, but you're just wasting my study time, my exercise time. You're wasting everything by making me stand in this formation twice a day.
Sure.
So I started experimenting with just not showing up. Like, what if I just don't show up? What if I don't show up and I tell somebody I won't show up? Well, that didn't work because then I had to come up with an excuse, and the excuse had to be verified, and it was complicated. So then I was like, well, what if I just don't show up and don't tell anybody? Because now if I don't show up and I don't tell anybody, it makes the person taking accountability have to decide, do they admit that there's someone missing and they don't know why that person's missing?
Exactly.
Or do they cover up for me? And I started to find that they would cover for me. And once I found that one person would do it, I realized this is something everybody's going to do, because nobody wants to fill out the paperwork and admit that they didn't know where the missing person was. So then I just started skipping formations, and I skipped them as freshmen, and I skipped them for the rest of my military academy career.
For the rest of the 3 years, you were there.
So when you get caught, breaking the rules of the academy, they file a form that punishes you, and you go on something called a tour. And a tour is 1 hour of your life that you're spending marching from point to point on a terrazzo, on a field. When you hit 100 demerits, you're called a centurion, because it means you're going to spend 100 hours marching back and forth. I became a centurion with 100 demerits my junior year. CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people. And I was like, there's literally not enough time for me to pay this off before I have to graduate. How am I going to do this? So I just didn't do them. And I thought to myself, if I just don't do it and don't say it, somebody else has to account for it. And the only way that this is going to work against me is if the person says that I didn't show up and they didn't find me, which makes it their responsibility. So I gambled my entire graduation on the fact that nobody would ever turn me in.
Wow.
And they didn't.
Already what is surprising me is how you're willing to partake in high stakes at an early age, which is interesting.
I just saw it as survival. I didn't see any other option.
So you're at the academy doing this, which by the way, is an esteemed place. I think people need to know this is the Air Force Academy, right, which is very challenging to get into the Air Force Academy. So you graduate and then you enter then the Air Force as a commissioned officer, correct, I believe. And then where do you go from there as a commissioned officer?
So I was an athlete at the Air Force Academy. I was a boxer and I was a fencer, the sport fencing.
Okay.
And I scored very high in athletic scores and very low in academic scores. So 90% of Air Force Academy graduates, if they meet the minimum standard of vision and fitness, they almost all go into pilot training right away. That's what the Air Force Academy is built to do. It's built to create pilots. So I graduate in 2003. We've had a 2-year war now in Afghanistan and Iraq. Everybody's going to pilot training. I don't want to fly. I actually apply my senior year. I apply to be Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which is their intelligence group. I'm like, make me intel. I speak Chinese. That's what I studied at the Air Force Academy. I have high scores in all these humanities studies, and not in any of my aerodynamic, thermodynamic, physics. All of those scores are below average. It's like I'm just a shoo-in for something cerebral, not something aviational.
Yes.
And it was a numbers game. It was the Air Force saying, no, you're going to go learn to fly. So they sent me to pilot training. I learned how to fly. I did well enough flying, but I hated flying. I mean, you're stuck. Nobody realizes how uncomfortable pilots really are. Tiny, uncomfortable seats, flying for hours on end, and the rules. There are so many rules. How fast you go, the altitude, how often you make reports in, and who's flying in what direction and what. Oh my gosh, dude, it was just.
And for you, who hates rules, right? You're like, this is terrible.
How do I escape this?
Yeah. So how do you escape it? And then what do you end up doing in the Air Force?
It's really interesting. Nobody has made me see it the way you're making me see it right now. I had just had my second good check flight. And when you go through pilot training, you go through flight exercises, and then a series of flight exercises takes you into a maneuver series where you do steep turns or flips or whatever else and rolls. And you do these maneuvers to check off, we call it a check flight. It checks off that you have the skills required. Well, I had done 3 previous check flights, and I was doing my 4th check flight, and all of my check flights were getting high scores. I was technically proficient at the skill.
Yes.
I just didn't like the skill. Well, after I finished the 4th check flight and it was another good performance, I was like, if I keep doing this, I'm going to end up a pilot.
Right.
And a pilot is a 10-year commitment in uniform. And I was like, I am accidentally shooting myself in the foot here. So I went to the commander of my wing and I told him I wanted to self-select out of pilot training. That's the fancy way of saying I want to quit. So I go to the commander and I say I want to self-select out. He tells me that it's virtually impossible. If it happens, the Air Force is going to kick me out of the Air Force and they're going to pin a $300,000 bill on my back to pay for the time that I wasted in pilot training and the time that I went to the Air Force Academy. And I was just like, well, I'm 24 years old. I'm like, if you put $300,000 on me, I'm bankrupt.
That's absolutely.
I can get out of that with just the filing of a piece of paperwork and start my life over again. So the threat was kind of empty. So I self-selected out of pilot training. And because of my check flights, because of my history of performance, they reclassified me into a different category and they put me into nuclear weapons instead.
Look at that. It's fascinating.
And I never realized, like, it really is. There is something about the high stakes where I know that I have everything to lose, but I feel like I have no other option.
Yeah. This is a theme at just, you said 24. Just 24. Look at that.
Yeah.
So now you go into it's nuclear missile. What is it called exactly?
So I'm a nuclear missile officer, and we're part of the nuclear weapons cadre.
All right.
And that's really the people who wear the keys around their neck and babysit warheads that could mean the end of all of mankind. That's really the job.
So literally, your responsibility is it to launch
on command
nuclear weapons?
Correct.
All right. So I could spend all day here, but I'm not because of time. but one thing I want to know, so you're 24 years old. How many nuclear missiles are you responsible for?
At 24 years old, I'm made a deputy missile crew commander. So I am the deputy underneath a missile crew commander, and we are a crew of 2. So I have one person who is superior to me sitting next to me, and we're the 2 people that have to turn the keys at the same time. The 2 of us command 10 missiles. Those 10 missiles each have 3 warheads. We have 30 warheads under our command at 99% readiness all the time. And we are one crew of 10 crews that's in one squadron, and there are 4 squadron on our one military base.
Okay.
So there's 240 warheads, of which 30 of them are ours.
Okay. So this is what I've always wanted to know about nuclear weapons and countries in particular is, it feels like we're in this constant arms race, country to country, right? But how many nuclear missiles are necessary to destroy the world? So roughly how many nuclear missiles does, say, the United States have?
2,500, I think.
So 2,500. And who's number 2 to the U.S.?
Russia. Russia's number 1, actually.
Oh, Russia's number 1.
I think they have 4,500.
So 4,500.
And then China's behind us with 900, 1,200.
Okay. So what's the difference of adding another 100, 1,000? What is the difference?
It's a great question because it's all extra icing, but that's all it is. It was my familiarity with nuclear proliferation that made me even more suitable for CIA, because one of CIA's main mission is called counter-proliferation, intercepting nuclear fissile material, preventing the development and the spread of nuclear devices.
Fair enough. One more question on nuclear missiles is, who authorizes the launch? Because I hear conflicting statements, and I'm sure it differs depending on the country. So if we're looking at, say, the United States, let's look at the UK and Russia. Who actually gives authority to launch a missile?
It's a hierarchy. So the highest echelon in the hierarchy is the president, of course. The president has what's called the nuclear football. It's a briefcase that somebody carries near the president at all times. And if the president decides to send a nuclear order, then the football is opened, and inside the football are materials so that he can create and validate an official nuclear message. And that message is sent worldwide or sent nationwide to all of our nuclear capable devices. And then people in the silos like me get that order, decipher it, decode it, put our keys in, turn the keys.
No questions asked.
None.
So you're telling me that literally the president of the United States can decide on his own, or her own, but in this case, his own, to launch a nuclear weapon, and that nuclear weapon will be launched. He doesn't have to consult, talk to anyone. No
Correct.
Generals, nothing.
Correct.
That is mind-blowing.
That is what happens when you are the commander in chief.